I don't think a lot of people know. 90% of shoppers never get past page 1.
That's true. That's why sponsored products matter so much. Relevance is going to keep declining the further down you scroll. It's a lot like walking into a physical store. The things at the front of the aisle are always going to sell better than the stuff in the middle or the end.
Nick Gezzar,
former senior account executive at Amazon
and military intelligence officer,
equipping sellers with the right intel
for a profitable strategy with Amazon-sponsored ads.
One of the things you got to really know is ads is not really an optional part of the equation anymore.
Why is that?
There was a term we had in the Army, you need to fight for information. And that's kind of what you're doing here. To go in, spend some money, see what works, optimize from there.
As an Amazon seller's getting started, where would you say the first place to go to?
Sponsored products is table stakes. If you are going to be on Amazon, this is the bare minimum that you need to do to be relevant.
There's some people that say you cannibalize your organic trying to be the #1 sponsor. What's your opinion of that?
They call it the mere exposure effect in marketing. What that does is it makes your brand appear more popular. This is something that I would advise every seller on Amazon to have.
Thanks for coming back to part 2 in our series of how to be an Amazon seller and looking specifically at sponsored products. Today, joining me is Nick Gezzar, subject matter expert on Amazon, former employee of Amazon. But he has a little bit of a window into what's going on with Amazon ads. So as we continue in this series, Nick, we touched on a little bit on the ABCs on part 1. Part 2, we're diving in a little bit more under the hood and specifically talking about sponsored products. But you know what? I want to lead with something you said to me a while back ago that I don't think a lot of people know. It's a stat you said it's flying under the radar, but it's in front of your face, that 90% of shoppers never get past page 1.
That's true. That's why sponsored products matter so much. If people are searching for your product, do you want to lose 9 out of 10 of them every time they search?
And most of the page 1 now is ads, at least the first half of that page.
That's why sponsored products, it's not optional anymore. Maybe 10 years ago, you could get by without doing it, but today you really need to be there if you want to drive that relevance in the algorithm and just have your product show up in front of the shopper.
So I have to accept the fact that I have to pay an Amazon tax. I'll call it that. An Amazon tax in the way of Amazon ads. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. I wish I had better news, but if you want to be there, you want to be selling, sponsored products is what you got to be doing.
Okay, all right. So I've accepted the fact that as part of my playbook, I need sponsored products. So tell me, as a seller or as an agency, what could I do better with sponsored products? How can I optimize and use it to my advantage? I've accepted the fact that I must use sponsored products to surface my products. How do I use it to my advantage?
You know, we're going to have another video series where we're probably going to talk more about bidding and keywords, really getting into the nuts and bolts.
We'll save it for that.
We'll save it for that. But the main thing you got to do is look at what are your primary ASINs that you want to be selling. You have an idea of what moves and what doesn't based on the price, based on the specific use of your product. Every product family, and I've seen nothing that has ever been an exception to this because I've also been a brand manager at firms like P&G and Lindt. There's always the top sellers in your catalog, and it trails down to the tail. You're going to have that 20% of your products driving 80% of your sales. Make sure that 20% that you are investing in there and that is what's showing up to those customers. Your most relevant products are showing up both in the category and for the branded searches. Now, for sellers, it can be difficult because not every seller has a unique product that only they sell. So branded terms aren't always necessarily the best for you, especially if you don't have a strong brand. Are people even going to search for it? But if you are selling, for example, give me an example, Rolando. Just generic product.
A generic product. How about dog food? Can we go dog food? I love my dog.
Ooh.
If you're is that a category you want to talk about?
That is, one of my partners I work with. in my consultancy. She used to work in at Hill's Pet Nutrition. Incredibly competitive category.
Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to type into the search bar on Amazon, dog food, and I'm just going to hit enter, see what comes up. Here we go.
All right, we got Merrick.
I've seen that. I've seen that brand. Look at what's interesting. You know, if you were watching our part one, what's interesting is how different the sponsored ad is coming out. A sponsored brand in this particular one. And no, we're not going to go into that in this, but it's just interesting how the display, it's giving you kind of subcategories within the store, and Amazon is looking for ways to tweak and enhance the advertising experience. And this is something I haven't seen yet. A carousel on one side and then the category to take you to their store.
And even like to which sub tab of their store. That's pretty brilliant. But sponsored products, never that flashy. They're just going to show up in the search results. So featured by Amazon. How surprising that they won.
Yeah. And look at Purina 1. They're number 2 and number 3 in the sponsored. And then Amazon brand. I didn't know Amazon made dog food.
You know, I actually did not either, but they're always expanding their private label stuff. It'd be interesting to see how well that goes for them. Because, I mean, dog food, that's a pretty big commitment. But what you can see here that's fascinating is Purina is just dominating sponsored products. The top 3 sponsored ads, different varieties of Purina dog food for the sponsored products. And then you look at the 2 organics. What are the next 2 organics? The same thing.
2 organics of Purina
dog foods. Yep.
Yeah. So if we look at the first 6 positions, right? So Amazon obviously is surfacing their own brand. That whole row, it's that you got to pay some money to get on that first row, and then like you said, row number 2, that's when you see the first organic result, and that is also Purina.
And this comes down to that these positive efficiencies, the flywheel is a term they like to use inside of Amazon, where as you build relevance through those sponsored products ads, you will gain a lot more relevance on the organic search as well. So that's why you're seeing Purina 1 showing up so hard, both in sponsored products and as the first 2 organic results.
Yeah, it's the same ASIN. This one here with the looks like an Eskimo or a I don't know exactly what dog it is, but
husky.
It looks like it's husky. Thank you, a husky that's on the bag as well as on the very first organic result.
And you can tell they're the same because just look at the number of reviews.
Yeah,
15, 156, same one, same price.
Wow.
But that is coming because obviously people have seen these sponsored ads. They click on them. The algorithm picks up on that. And that's why these are our most relevant ones right here.
Oh, okay. So I want to look at something with sponsored products, if reviews is even a consideration, because so both of the sponsored ones here are 4.7 for Purina that are in the sponsored. I want to just take a look at the Amazon. Amazon's at 4.3. Just want to point that out, but they still put themselves in the number 1 sponsored, but Amazon's Amazon. They'll do whatever pleases them.
How could this have happened? It's a mystery.
In theory, if it was a race, they would be in 3rd position based on that. Well, let's look at this other Purina. Is it a coincidence, Nick? I ask you, sponsored products, if we look at the first 3, so 1, 2, and 3, they're all Purina. They all are rated very highly from Amazon. All of them at 4.7.
Yep. When you are bidding on those, actually your star reviews will actually help you, assuming that they are good, to build that relevance, because Amazon doesn't want to be serving ads for trash products. If those were like 2.1 and half the reviews were like, oh, my dog got violently ill after this, Amazon doesn't want to surface that no matter how much you're spending on it. If your reviews are generally above 4.0, you're going to be safe. Safer. Once you start getting below that, I would start getting worried.
And look right here. This is exactly what you're talking about. 4 stars and above is the next row, and that's a carousel of sponsored product ads. And 4.6, I would say 4.6 is going to be the lowest because all the products above it are 4.7. So if we're thinking about a category and you're using sponsored products to drive sales, to increase views, And if your reviews are below 4, especially let's just say the competitive category like dog food or others, you're going to have a tough time. And would you be forced to pay more than, let's say, Purina's paying on dog food because you're paying a penalty because your your reviews are low, or Amazon just won't even consider it because your reviews are too low, or star rating, I should say?
You're either going to be paying out the nose or just not being surfaced at all.
Mm.
Amazon is as part of their customer obsession tenet, reviews are a big deal to them. When Amazon tried physical stores, they pulled out of that, but they were actually trying to make brick and mortar stores selling Amazon goods. They called it Amazon 4-star because they would not stock any product that had less than 4 stars in the reviews of the website. To them, that's a critical threshold, that 4 stars.
Okay.
So that also needs to come back to your advertising strategy, also your product strategy, because if you're consistently falling below 4 stars, you're not going to show up in search. And also, people probably just don't like your product, and you should really rethink how you're selling it.
You got to reevaluate. You got to reevaluate. Wow. So if for those that haven't used sponsored products or want to know, I know that from sponsored products, unlike sponsored brands, that leads you to your Amazon product detail page. And on that page, obviously, you have your chance to convince the customer, persuade them that your product is the best and all that other stuff. But talk a little bit more about sponsored products now that we're getting deeper and using that as a lever point to create that awareness or create the sales that you're looking for, because it could be profitable. I know we talked a little bit of this about this in part 1, but how the role it should play in the mix of your playbook to drive sales through your product detail page?
Again, sponsored products is your baseline, because when you have people searching for a specific product like that, you can assume that they're getting ready to buy. And when they're clicking on it, there's a high chance that they're going to purchase whatever it is they clicked on. Now, the weakness of sponsored products is it can only take you to a product detail page. You are you have less degrees of freedom than you do with the other ones, but this is still where most shoppers find the items that they're looking for.
I heard you say something I haven't heard before. Many people, or most, I think you said most people will click on these sponsored. It's like in this first row here, they're all Purina, for example. People will click on that and then buy.
Absolutely. Yeah, because people are looking for something in this category that matches their search term. Hey, there's the item. I'm going to buy it. The analog would be like, hey, I'm going to the store because I need to buy some rice. You're going to walk to the section of the store where the bags of rice are, and you're just going to grab one. You were there on a mission because you were searching for that.
I'm only paying when I click. It's not impressions like Facebook ads, paying by impression. I'm paying by the click.
Yep.
All right.
You only pay when somebody clicks on it. So scrolling through that, Purina is not getting charged unless you click on their other 2 sponsored products.
Interesting. And I see that if I scroll through here, what I'm seeing is that sponsored products keep showing up. Using that 90%, that using your words, that 90% of shoppers will only shop on page 1, essentially. What are the chances that if I'm using sponsored products, I'm going to be relevant? And I do see the Amazon brand show up down here. I see Purina show up again. I see it's interesting again. You get almost 2 rows full of sponsored and then another organic. Do shoppers come down here to kind of the middle or below and still click on sponsored products? Am I still relevant, or am I really, I got to be towards the top to be a player here?
If you made a graph, relevance is going to keep declining the further down you scroll.
I see.
It's a lot like walking into a physical store. The things at the front of the aisle are always going to sell better than the stuff in the middle or the end.
Gotcha.
There's been by the time you've scrolled down here to Nutrish, which your cursor's on, one with the there's like a lady on it. How many other products has that shopper scrolled through? And then multiply that by how many people are searching for dog food, which is a massive category, by the way.
Yep. And that's the Rachel Ray brand, right? Isn't that Nutrish her brand?
You know, I only own guinea pigs, so I'm not a big dog food.
There it is.
Right, it is Rachel Ray.
Just the word nutrish, that sounds like, and it says Rachel Ray once you go into the product detail page.
I thought she only made human food. Her expanding.
You'd be wrong, my friend.
But by the time you get down to Rachel's product here,
Yep.
how many other products have you seen? And at that point,
well, I've been hit with a lot.
Right, I don't think Rachel's doing great there.
No.
She's going to be less relevant. She's probably getting less clicks.
Yeah, she needs some help. You know what this looks a little bit like? It's not the Blue Buffalo brand. There's another brand called something Wild. They have a similar icon. And when it comes to some of the, and you've been around, you know, product CPG companies, they will do product labeling for other, you know, the big ones. Will do the generic products for a lot of the other, like where you see coffee, and you see like, wait a minute, the packaging looks nearly identical.
You'll have factories where line 1 is doing major CPG firm, lines 2 and 3 are doing private label for smaller brands.
Indeed, and because it's fairly cheap. You know, you don't have to buy new packaging, you don't have to buy new box type, you don't have to get new molds for the plastic. You're using the exact same thing, just wrapping maybe a different
slightly change the recipe. But I think what you were getting at, and now we're definitely diverging from sponsored ads, but what we're talking about here is category cues. Because when you clicked on that, you immediately thought, Blue Buffalo or that Wild, whatever it is, dog. Because they're using those same general suggestions through the way that they are packaged to make you think, this looks good, a natural new age dog food.
Yes, that was the Amazon brand. Let me go back up here.
Wag?
Wag.
What's that?
Wag. Oh, interesting. I refreshed my screen and now
Amazon disappeared.
Yes. You know, what's interesting about that is that things are so dynamic, and things are like refreshing the screen, the IP address, your customer. If you're a customer already of Amazon, it's interesting how nothing is static. Like, I'm going to come back and see the same ad. No, it seems as if Amazon is also continuously experimenting with the types of ads, how it shows it to you, when in what position, to see when and where you're going to click.
Not only that, but also things like, imagine Purina has a fixed budget on all of these sponsored products. If they exhaust that for the day, all of a sudden you will see a different brand show up because they will stop bidding on those for that day. But at this time of day that you are looking at this, Purina is dominating.
They sure are. And would you say they're getting either good advice, or they kind of know what they're doing here when it comes to the Amazon strategy for sponsored products?
I think they know what they're doing here, because if you look at this, depending on what kind of dog you have and what their needs are, in these top 6, I mean, these are all very distinct dog foods. A high protein dog food. I think the first one's for joint health, probably for older dogs. They've got a German Shepherd on there. They notoriously have bad hips. I grew up with German Shepherds. But all 6 of these fit a different need state for your dogs. This one's kind of category specific, but I know dog owners the last 20 years have gotten far more specific in the way they feed their dogs. But when I was a kid, there was just dog food, which was next to cat
dog food for, it was senior dog and for puppies, pretty much, right?
Pretty much.
And adult. I think those were 3: puppies, adult, and seniors.
Yep. And now there is even more segmentation of that. So I think Purina is actually doing a great job with that, because if you are looking for dog food, they're trying to meet all of your potential need states on the most generic search for that category.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, if we're trying to provide sellers here with a little more value when it comes to sponsored products, there's multiple strategies, obviously, that you can use. In this case, we did a category search. What do you say about the category search? In this case, is an ultra competitive dog food where maybe I'll do dog food. It doesn't come up here. How about I'll do it this way? Organic dog food. It's more specific. It should eliminate some of the others. And where do you come down on something that's more tailored maybe to the product that you're trying to target, or you theorize the customer is targeting, versus that big category? Like, because every seller wants to be, if you're dog food, I want to be at the top, right? For dog food. But as you saw, massively competitive, high rated product as well as thousands of reviews. And my best, if I'm toward the beginning, to go somewhere else than not try to storm the beach. If I'm using an Army term.
So I went and got an MBA a couple of years ago, and there was a classic answer that's applicable to questions like this.
Okay.
It depends.
It took an MBA to get that answer.
I was incredibly frustrated getting that MBA, but that was the answer to like 90% of the questions you asked in class. But this really, it comes down to what your product is and what your product strategy is. As a consultant, if somebody's like, hey, I'm going to go launch a new brand of dog food, I would say, don't. Unless you have tens of millions of dollars in funding, you're not going to break into this.
And look at the results, though. And the results that came back on the web or on Amazon are different than the Purina blanket that we saw on just dog food.
Oh, there you go at the top, though. There's your boy's Blue Buffalo.
Yes. Blue Buffalo is number one on the sponsored brands. And then the sponsored products row, it's a mixture. And what's interesting is that Purina doesn't show up at all unless they own one of these brands. That's what I don't know. But the Purina name itself doesn't come up in there. And Nutrish is actually in the let's call it the third position for sponsored products.
You have to look at what your product strategy is, how much money you have, and what niche your product serves in the market. If it's very specific, you need to be bidding on those very specific search terms. If it's something with broad appeal that everybody can buy and enjoy, then it's probably time to look at those category keywords. And again, we'll get into it later in a future video series about bidding and keywords. But a keyword, they are not all built the same. Some are going to be incredibly expensive. Some, you might be the only bidder, depending on how specific we're getting.
I see. All right. Let's see. You're right. Look at this. Organic dog food, small breed. Organic dog food, dry. So I'm sure all of these, let's call them subcategories or even smaller niches within, in theory, those may have a little bit better return if your product is better suited. Am I right or am I wrong on that?
Oh, absolutely. If you had a brand of organic wet dog food for seniors, you would want to bid on those terms. You don't want to be there for just organic dog food because you're going to have a ton of lost sales, or even worse, be there just for dog food.
It's a keyword: organic wet senior dog food. Let's see how that looks. Okay. And interesting on this one is that the first three results are trying to get you away from that. They're all dry. And then the wet.
Weird.
Here's the wet.
All right. Yeah, I guess people are just massively overbidding on that. That is fascinating. I'm not an expert on this category. I've just had a secondhand exposure.
Can I ask you another question? Because this is, I asked somebody this the other day when it came to ads, and it's relevant for sponsored products. And I'm going to use this example. If I'm a Coke drinker, I probably don't drink Pepsi. So why in the world would Pepsi bid on Coke or a term that, Coke Light or Coke Cherry Coke? In this case, wet dog food for seniors, and it's dry dog food that shows up. Is there a lot of switching that happens here? Are you really getting consumers making the switch? Because I'm looking for wet and I got dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ignore that and go on to the wet ones.
This is zooming out to broader marketing theory, but there are very few true brand loyalists anywhere. People who I only ever drink Coke. I don't drink many soft drinks. I'm just going to drink whatever's there in front of me if the situation's appropriate. I have Pepsi just about as much as Coke. Most brands, Coke drinkers drink other beverages as well. They don't drink exclusively Coca-Cola. So there's always a ton of switching potential and the ability to take share from the larger brands. I think it's kind of it's a slightly outdated mindset that there are these true brand loyalists out there.
I gotcha.
If you ever want to do a real deep dive on that, there's a great author out there named Dr. Byron Sharp. He wrote a book called How Brands Grow that really gets into the statistics behind all that.
All right.
Fascinating.
Awesome. Read. That is a fascinating read. So it may be worth your while to at least dip your toe in something that would allow that switch to happen. So in this case, all of the top sponsored products are not wet dog food.
See,
they're dry.
It's a little tougher because this is a different category as opposed to a different brand. Wet and dry dog foods are distinct products. So I do wonder why they're bidding that way. They might have, again, this will get back into bidding and keywords, might have gone for too broad of a search.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. So let's button it up on that. So let's summarize a little bit here. 90% of shoppers will never go past the first page. The relevancy tends to drop off as you're scrolling down. So it may be worth to be in the top fold or the top half versus the bottom half of a page because of that. There's fewer clicks and fewer relevancies. Was there something else you wanted to button this argument up?
Sponsored products is table stakes. If you are going to be on Amazon, this is the bare minimum that you need to do to be relevant.
Awesome.
For all the reasons you just stated.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Nick Gezzar, former senior account executive for Amazon at one point. You've gotten a little bit of a look behind the curtain, and Nick and I will be in episode number 3, where we're going to go a little deeper into sponsored brands. So if you want to know more and nerd out, we'll see you